Okay, so we've got a variety of felt tip pens here that are available commercially. Been ordering them through ArtMart or CRC. First is the Pentel Sign Pen. Pentel Sign Pen was developed in Japan in the 1960s so that business folk could do calligraphy really fast. It has a bullet tip, felt tip, as you can see, a bullet-shaped tip, which means that if you hold it the standard way that I was taught by my war widow first grade teacher, there is a balance between the thumb, the middle finger, and the forefinger. That gently between these three fingers, the barrel of the pen or pencil rests. So basically it's not a death grip, it's not a Vulcan death grip, it's just a gentle balance between those three fingers. I have freshmen who hold their pencils like this, like this, like that. Anyway, I'm from a generation though where I was taught a certain way to hold a pencil, and that's a typical way to hold the pen at a 45-degree angle. The sign pen, however, has some different properties. If you rotate with your thumb and forefinger up to here, it's a slightly different grip, and that gives you one line weight. So just try to do a few parallel lines with the finest line weight that the sign pen can do, and you'll discover that a new sign pen, at any rate, a fresh sign pen, it's not like a fresh vegetable. A fresh sign pen has certain properties in terms of the durability and ductility of the felt tip. Over time, a sign pen will degrade and actually will become bolder, kind of like me. And then at 45-degree angle, you'll notice that the sign pen has a second line weight. So between the 90-degree angle in which we hold the pen straight up and down, you'll notice one line weight. At a 45-degree angle, you'll notice a second line weight. So beginning graphics courses in graphic design, fashion, illustration, advertising, landscape architecture, our first exercise is always just a series of parallel lines. As meditative and as zen as that appears to be, it actually does teach something, because over time you are developing a rhythm in terms of the spacing, and you're developing a certain amount of muscle memory in the arm. Now, I'm moving the entire arm. I'm not moving the wrist. If I were moving the wrist, I would be like, eh. It would only be like, I think I can go over here. I can't really. No. Moving the entire arm from the shoulder to the elbow down. So that creates a continuous fluid motion by which you're able to then start to pull lines. We're not pushing a pencil. We're not pushing a pen. We are pulling. And that motion of pulling creates a little bit more straightness and consistency in your line work. So, if we hold the sign pen at 20 degrees, we might change up the grip once again. This is a totally different grip. This is basically using all 5 fingers with the pointer finger up near the top of the barrel, middle finger and thumb in the middle of the barrel, and the last 2 fingers here. You can actually drag a third line weight out of that sign pen. And it's basically dragging the side of the bullet tip, which creates a third line weight. So 3 possible line weights with this particular tool, depending on how the pen is gripped. So it's a totally different way of essentially dragging this side of the barrel. This actually works with colored pencils as well. You can render large areas of color with colored pencil by using this same grip. So first grip, again, 90 degrees, balanced between the thumb, forefinger, and middle finger, creates a 90-degree angle by which we can pull very thin lines. A 45-degree angle, balanced between the 3 fingers, creates a second line weight. Basically a 15 or 20-degree angle for the third grip, what uses all 5 fingers in order to drag the pen there. Okay. So the first basic exercise is a series of parallel lines. These are doodles you can do in your sketchbook or notebook, in other classes or otherwise, but just a series of parallel lines that are somewhat evenly spaced. This teaches you, like I said, the motor skills of pulling a line, but also the visual skills of creating an even tempo or rhythm of negative space between the lines. So while it seems like a fairly elementary exercise, it is teaching your brain a couple of different things. For the second exercise, I'd like to introduce the finer line pens. There's more than one, for sure. This is the Pilot Fineliner. Pilot is, I believe, a British company, that has a similar bullet-tipped felt-tip pen to the sign pen. It's basically like Big Bear, Little Bear when it comes to the relationship of these pens. They have very similar tips, but they're basically, one is the smaller version of the other. So they work particularly well in illustrative drawings because of their similar properties. I am going to grab a newer one just so you can see the properties of that felt tip. And these felt tip pens do degrade as well with use. So do monitor that. They do not last forever. They do change their properties. Again, with the Pilot Fineliner, I will hold it now at 90 degrees and I get 1 line weight. I'll hold it at 45 degrees and get a slightly thicker line weight. I hold it at 20, it's going to destroy the felt tip. But with a newer Pilot Fineliner, I can get 2 line weights out of that as well. This is slightly older, so its felt tip has a slightly different property. Pretty consistent throughout the life of the pen. We'll get for sure 1 line weight, but a brand new Pilot Fineliner will distribute more than 1 line weight. Its cousin, the Pilot Ultrafine Point Permanent Type, is a permanent marker version of the Pilot Fineliner. Pilot Fineliner is water-based, so it has a way of absorbing into paper and trace paper a certain way. This is permanent, so I can actually watercolor over this. So I'll take this one in the field and draw on watercolor paper because I can put water-based medium over it. You can also put this on plastic and things like that. So permanent ink versus water-based ink. And if I hold that at 90 degrees, you can see that's an extremely thin line right there. And at 45 degrees, a slightly bolder line. And I'm particularly happy with this pen. What I'm not happy with is its life, is that this tip is so sensitive that a couple of weeks and it's already shot. And particularly on watercolor paper, which has more tooth or more abrasiveness to it. So I'm not happy with how long these last, but I'm happy with it in that it's compatible with water-based medium. Some markers are alcohol-based, some markers are petroleum-based, and so these pens interact differently with whether the marker is petroleum or alcohol-based. So that compatibility is another discussion. The Staedtler Pigment Liner is more expensive. This is $3.50, $4, but these last really long and have a fairly consistent archival India ink base. They come in a couple of different sizes, and I've been very happy with them in terms of their interactivity with markers on trace medium and other translucent media. Any other brands that I have to show you? Yes. All right. Another pigment liner. This is a see, not good. Near the end of its life, so that goes over there. This is a cousin of the sign pen. This is a pigment sign pen. The sign pen is water-based. This is pigment-based. So this is India ink once again, and it's a thicker, bolder cousin of the sign pen. So it's an option for you. If you see sign pens at a store and you go, wait a minute, these two don't look alike, that silver band right there, I don't know if that's signification of royalty or class structure or anything like that, but just know that this is a pigment-based ink or an India-based ink, which is a ground-up carbon, versus a water-based ink, which is going to be a little bit thinner. So, and they do cost differently as well, so there's different grades of cost associated with those. The Germans have developed also the Stadler Triplus Fineliner. This has a little thing that says dry safe, which means if you're like some faculty here at Ball State and just constantly leave the caps off, you're like, these will in fact continue to work in theory. It's called the Triplus because it has a 3-sided barrel that's also very comfortable in terms of the optimal holding angle, because it actually addresses 3 fingers. And so these are available in like 30 colors if that is a preference for you. When I do a page of parallel lines, then I also like to get in here and start to, again, train the brain or train the eye to put different hatches or different patterns or shapes in between the parallel lines. So just that, instead of just using up an entire page just for lines, this actually can become a secondary exercise. And you'll see this. This is available in Chip Sullivan's book, which is over there, drawing the landscape. One of the books that's here in the studio. This is another way of training the brain to start to think in between these lines, and also train the arm and the wrist to work as motor functions. But instead of just thinking about a page of lines, you can actually get quite a bit of exercises in tone and hatching that will become valuable for representing things in the landscape and in the built form very, very soon. Gives a little bit of tone to and depth to drawings as well. Start to find your optimum comfortable angle, whether you're right-handed or left-handed. Change it up a bit and just try to get even coverage of tone using the different media here. You get actually 2 calisthenic exercises out of the same piece of paper as you work. Okay. So another exercise I call is just a matter of wayfinding. I'm going to put 2 dots on the paper and then do my best to connect them. 2 dots, and what this does is starts to train your entire arm to move different directions, as opposed to just horizontal parallel lines. Find the dot. Find the dot. And you can start to do closed geometries if you want. You may be tempted to move the paper. That's fine for a lot of things, unless your stuff is taped down. What I have here is a piece of foam core cut to accommodate the camera here, and so this becomes a very portable thing to draw on. The foam core also provides a little bit of cushion between the pen and the drawing surface, and that's why I've asked you to put a placemat down, because there's a little bit of cushion there between the wooden butcher block surface and the paper itself. So just connect the dots. Pee-wee's Playhouse used to have a Connect the Dots song that I used to sing, but not everybody gets the reference anymore. So, if you're stuck in meetings, this is another great doodling exercise that teaches your hand, your arm, and your brain to work together. And that's what we're doing here. We're engaging different parts of the brain to enhance motor function and to enhance perception of space and the representation of it on paper. friend of mine who taught landscape architecture had quite a collection of these types of doodles, and she exhibited them at First Thursday a few years ago. Now, I hope you notice something here, that there is a slight overlap. Overlapping when we're drawing a shape is helpful because it takes the pressure off in terms of the lines connecting. If you take the pressure off, then you actually find that you can draw geometric figures a little bit cleaner if you just allow the lines to overlap. Trace paper's fine. Yep. Okay. So as that starts to fill in, now you can decide, well, do I want to get a couple of exercises out of this? Then you can start filling in the shapes. Again, a secondary option of practicing is to just start filling in the shapes with different tones or different textures, whether that be little loops or circles, or dashes or dots. That makes sure that every exercise has a secondary function to it. Also, it's a great way to practice parallel lines within these boundaries. And provides more doodling pleasure during your long meetings. So. Colleagues who find themselves in conference calls often, I'll always notice that there's a page of doodles left behind after a conference call or something like that. We can do different back and forth exercises, loops, dots, dashes. Create a series of tones that exist within those boundaries that our overlapping lines have created. Exercise 4. Exercise 4 takes the principles of exercise 1, which was just a series of parallel lines, and challenges us to start to do multiple directions. This is kind of like the motorcycles in Tron, but I'm testing now the ability of the brain to distinguish the amount of space in between the lines. So we just kind of work our way out and over. So again, just like the motorcycles in Tron. This isn't just about pulling lines either. As I mentioned before, you're learning a couple of different directions, but you're also distinguishing the perception of negative space in between a series of lines. So exercise 4 does kind of pull on a couple of ideas or principles in the previous exercises. And you can vary the spacing, vary the frequency, vary the intensity of those. Another variation of that is circles or bubbles. So I'll start with a bean or a bubble or circle and then just work my way out. It's a variation of that, but it involves the continuous motion as opposed to the stop motion of the frames. Or I'll do a couple of pebbles here and then do the Japanese rock garden around them. All of those are valuable graphic calisthenic exercises that you can do in the margins of papers and meetings and conference calls and things like that. Pivoting. Yes. Sorry? Yep. Yep. Landscape architecture friend of mine taught me a way of sort of balancing or pivoting to prevent smudging, because I had this horrible habit of having this entire side of my hand being covered with graphite or things like that. And it's a method by which he taught me is that to use the extended pinky method. So that's nice for high society gatherings and cocktail parties and things like that. Of course, you're like, yeah, it's pinky's extended, yes. But what you can do is use just the surface area of this side of the pinky to pivot. And so if you extend your pinky out now and you start to repeat some of the things we've done now, it will reinforce the notion that the entire arm needs to be moving. And so where just this portion of the pinky here is dragging or is supporting the arm, it allows for a continuous fluid motion of the arm. So try that, see if that works for you as a way of balancing the arm. And there's a couple of variations of exercises 3 and 4. So let's get to know our markers a little bit. These are the AD markers out of Massachusetts, made in America. They are petroleum-based markers. They have a certain odor to them. They also have different properties based on how they interact with other media. So petroleum will basically dissolve. These markers will dissolve each other on trace papers, so you'll start to notice a different layering and blending property. This is a Letraset marker made in Britain. It is an alcohol-based marker that has totally different properties than the petroleum itself. And then the Copic markers out of Japan are also alcohol-based markers. They come in a couple of different sizes and properties, so and are compatible with toner. One of the reasons these are so popular with Japanese illustrators and artists is their ability to work with toner. So on a copy machine heats up toner on a drum and it's pressed onto bond paper. This marker will dissolve the toner. These markers will not. So when it comes to a lot of the illustrations in Japanese comic books and things like that, these markers become a favorite for that. But all of the markers have different tips and different edges. The British marker here has a medium or small tip on that end. It has a secondary thin tip by which it pushes the ink through a fine line. So that's a kind of a fun, kind of different, weird way of approaching fine lines. On that end, on this end, the chisel tip, of course, has 1 line weight, 2 line weight there. So these became quite quite popular for a while. Then they went out of production, and now they're back by popular demand. They also followed the letter set numbering system. So graphic designers who used the Pantone numbering system, this follows the Pantone numbering system perfectly. So for very specific colors, graphic designers really like this one for that. The Copics also have a chisel tip that allows for 2 line weights on that end, and then a brush tip on this end for the more painterly feel. Copic makes 4 or 5 different markers, all of them alcohol-based, but the different styles of marker have the brush tip or the chisel tip. The Illustrator's version is a medium tip here, as well as the chisel tip on this side. So they have different names. This is the Copic 2. This is the Copic Sketch, and the ones available locally are also called the Copic Ciao. So if you feel Italian, ciao, you can appreciate that particular one. The AD markers that are favored by our friends in landscape architecture, I think that's why they've kind of taken on for us planners as well, have a heck of a lot more ink in this barrel. So these things will last years. So just because the sheer amount of ink that they have. They are refillable, so you can buy, for any of these markers, you can buy refills for any of them, which is interesting. And if you break the tip, you can replace the tip and refill them again. So just know that these things are, when they dry out, they can be maintained and replaced by replacing the tip and by refilling them. It does take 2 hands sometimes to open them, so I use the non-dominant hand here and the dominant hand here. I twist them against each other like so to get them apart. We'll notice the tip has a single tip as opposed to a double tip. That has some advantages and disadvantages. Any double tip marker has advantages in that it has more flexibility. Any double tip marker has a disadvantage in that they tend to dry out faster, just by nature of having 2 openings on the marker. So the AD marker has a plug on this end, and consequently, because it doesn't have the ability of this coming loose, it tends to last longer. On the disadvantage, it doesn't have the variety of tips that these other markers that I've demonstrated have, unless you hold the marker differently. So if we hold the marker with the tip, or what I call the toe, because I might have a history in country line dancing, the toe of the marker gives us 1 line weight. But you'll notice I'm holding the marker slightly differently. I'm almost holding it like a chopstick, like the upper leg of a chopstick, if you will. So if we hold with just the toe contacting here, we can get 1 line weight. Again, because of my history with country line dancing, there is the heel of the marker. That yields a 2nd line weight. And then the full chisel leads that 3rd line weight. So, just by holding the marker differently, we can get 3 line weights out of that. And we can make up for perhaps the disadvantages of the single marker not having multiple tips. To close the marker, do not jam it back in. What Jim Leggett, author of Drawing Shortcuts, one of the books over there, recommends is simply dropping the marker head onto the tabletop. He feels that that's enough pressure to close the cap without creating a nuisance for you later. And then sometimes these things can get on so tight that they will not. So he recommends that simply dropping the head of the marker onto it is enough to close the marker for its next use. Okay. So that creates a sound in the studio, of course. You're like, yeah, exactly. Okay. So.